As you're waiting for the bus to come, we can't quite see from the shot how big is the crowd, and do you have a sense if those are folks who are supporters or folks who are listening to still make up their minds?
The crowd here is pretty supportive of Spanberger, I must say. Seems to be a few dozen so far behind me. The bus is on its way. She has been holding a lot of various events here. She has a rally over the weekend and mix of events that are smaller. For example, the Republicans held this diner event this morning, which was a mix of undecided voters and supporters. So these candidates really are trying to turn out the base and also really win over those on-the-fence voters. And I will say that for all the conversation about this race being a referendum on the Trump administration, Spanberger's making it more about Virginia. But I wanna bring up the Attorney General's race. You have Democrat Jay Jones, who got in a controversy over violent text messages he sent years ago, and his campaign is counting on Virginia voters to view his AG race as that referendum on the Trump administration, given the Attorney General's unique role in being able to challenge the federal government, fight back against federal overreach. So that's an interesting dynamic here at play that we've been hearing a lot from voters about, Chris.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, Jeff, well, the president hasn't weighed in on Virginia, but he is holding a tele-rally there tonight. I wonder what you think about him and this race, and particularly the comment of that second voter who said, you know, people should be looking at the issues and not Donald Trump. Is he a player in this in Virginia?
Oh, absolutely. This is a figure who's appeared 3 times on a Virginia ballot and 3 times has been overwhelmingly rejected by Virginia voters. And if these polls are any indication of the direction of this gubernatorial campaign, he's about to be rejected a 4th time, albeit indirectly, by Democrat Abigail Spanberger. What is going on in Washington is inseparable from what's going on in Virginia. It's not just in Northern Virginia, the suburbs of Washington, D.C., where there's a significant federal presence. It's significant as well in the Richmond area and certainly down by the seacoast, civilian employees in great numbers supporting the big defense presence down there. And depending on how one does the arithmetic, federal largesse, direct and indirect, accounts for about 30% of the Virginia economy. So between DOGE, between mass firings and layoffs, these staggered retirements, and now this months on federal government shutdown, the impact on the Virginia economy has become quite clear. There have been steady increases in joblessness since January. There was a pause in August, but it has resumed. And this is not anything that the Republicans are particularly enthusiastic about discussing. In fact, the soon-to-be former Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, and Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican nominee for governor, have defended the president's assault on the bureaucracy.
Well, let me ask you quickly then, given all those things, DOGE, the firings, the government shutdown, people, losing SNAP benefits, on and on and on, we tend to look often at Virginia and this time of year as kind of foreshadowing what might come next year. But because of all these variables, do you think that this is an election where you can extrapolate something that might be useful for the midterms?
Since 1976, with one exception, the party that wins the presidency loses the governorship in Virginia the following year. And as Virginia's electorate has become more nationalized, the majority of residents here are non-natives. 42% of the population is Black, Hispanic, and Asian. The majority, 2/3 of Virginians, live in cities and suburbs. This is the foundation of the Democratic vote in this state. So it is easy to draw something of a message about what could happen in the midterms by parsing the results here in Virginia.
All right, let's take it from Virginia to New Jersey. Michael Schnell, what's happening where you are?
Yeah, Chris, I'm here in Morristown, New Jersey, where right behind me you can see supporters of Mikey Sherrill showing up, expecting her arrival in just a few minutes on her bus tour. She's then going to enter this local county headquarters here for the Democratic Party, meet with a number of voters, and start a launch of canvassing as she tries to get as much turnout as possible in advance of tomorrow's election. Now, I've spoken to a number of voters here waiting outside for Mikey Sherrill's event. Two of them told me they've already voted. They've already voted early for Mikey Sherrill, making it clear that they wanted to make sure their voice was heard and they got their vote in. A lot of enthusiasm in advance of tomorrow's race. And I asked, what is the issue that's driving you to the ballot box? Why do you want to make sure you're getting out there and casting your vote? Interestingly enough, they both mentioned the rule of law. And we know that President Trump has loomed so large over this New York gubernatorial race. He's endorsed the Republican, Jack Ciattarelli, a number of folks looking at this race as a bellwether to see how strong President Trump's endorsement is faring in its second term and sort of get a status check on what voters think of his policies. Take a listen to what these voters said when I asked them about what was most important to them come this election.
We need to get back to the rule of law, and I think she believes in that. We need to begin to shore up the safety nets for the vulnerable amongst us and the middle class, because without a strong middle class, we have a divided society.
And you voted early in this election.
Yes, I wanted to make sure it was there.
Will you be supporting Mikey Sherrill tomorrow?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I would never, ever, ever vote for Republican, ever, because of Donald Trump.
I think the whole Trump thing is very dangerous. They're not, they're not respecting law. We're going to have what kind of a country can we have when there's no respect for law? It's very dangerous. So I'm supporting her.
So, Chris, again, there's been so much said in the commentary about President Trump's role in this race. You hear it from those voters. It's clearly on the top of their mind. Now, those were three voters of the nearly 1.2 million who have already voted in this election, either by mail or by early voting. So, again, we are just going to get started here at this Mikey Sherrill event in a few minutes as the candidate delivers her final pitch ahead of tomorrow's election.
Yeah, and I'm told the bus with Spamberger is arriving in Richmond, Virginia. That will bring me to you and back in New Jersey, Tara. I don't need to tell you there's two types of persuadable voters. There's the folks who haven't made their minds up yet, truly, and then there's the ones who haven't decided whether they're going to get off the couch and actually vote at all. Three polls released in New Jersey last Thursday show between 2% and 7% of voters undecided. How do you reach undecided in these closing 24 hours or so?
Well, that's where the ground operation and money for direct voter contact comes into play. That's why you see the airwaves being inundated with the ads explaining to people, listen, this is why you need to vote. But ground operation is really where that comes into play, convincing people that you need to vote because it matters. This impacts your life. And you know, what we're seeing right now, and especially in New Jersey, which I think is going to be a little closer than Virginia, the through line here is that Donald Trump's abysmal approval ratings, as you saw with your poll and others released today, some show Donald Trump's approval rating over 60, disapproval rating over 60%. That is awful. And that is an albatross around the necks of the Republican candidates. And that should be a shot in the arm for the Democratic candidates who normally in governor's races, they are specific to that state. Usually it's state issues. And in New Jersey, it's definitely taxes, affordability, utility prices, what's happening with the Gateway Tunnel. But Donald Trump's behavior over the last month or so with the Republicans and the shutdown and Donald Trump attacking people in New Jersey specifically, for example, threatening to cancel the Gateway Tunnel project, which is incredibly important to folks in New York and New Jersey, what's happening with the ICE raids, the lack of SNAP benefits, people losing their benefits. This impacts people. The federal government's role impacts people at the state level. That is something that I think people who normally may not have been paying attention or who may not have been motivated to vote are looking at this and saying, wait a minute, our Democratic governors or our governors are the first line of defense against an overreaching, irresponsible, retribution-style federal government. Who do we want in that role? And I think that's a motivating factor that is something we have not seen in the past in both New Jersey and Virginia. And just one last statistic, in the last 90 years, 5 times when the Democrats have swept the New York mayor's race, New Jersey governor's race, and Virginia, it's happened 5 times. In the last 90 years. So that is something that's, we need to pay attention to, because after that, usually that's an indicator of the midterms, what happens.
It was almost poetic in a cruel way. After years of chaos, it wasn't a revolution, an election, or a protest that finally cornered Trump. It was the one thing he'd always treated as irrelevant: the law. For a man who lived his entire life bending rules, buying silence, and suing his way out of trouble, being told no was more than defeat. It was exposure. He thought the courts would protect him. After all, he'd stacked them himself. But the thing about power is that it believes its own myth until reality breaks through. One by one, judges, even the ones he'd handpicked, started ruling against him. They quoted the Constitution instead of cable news. They treated him not like a king, but like a defendant. And suddenly, the showman ran out of stage. That's when the rage began. He attacked them all, called them corrupt, biased, enemies of the people. But the truth is, he wasn't afraid of injustice. He was afraid of accountability. Because accountability doesn't bend to charm or threat. It's cold, procedural, boring, and unstoppable. It's the one thing that can't be bullied. Every courtroom became a mirror he couldn't break. Every ruling stripped away the myth he'd sold, that power makes you untouchable. And as the verdicts rolled in, civil, criminal, financial, America got to see something it hadn't seen in years. A system remembering what it was built for. Maybe that's why it mattered. Not because the judges were heroes. They weren't. They were just doing their jobs. But that's exactly what made it powerful. In an age of noise and spectacle, professionalism became rebellion. Integrity became resistance. And in those quiet moments, as gavels fell and lawyers argued, democracy found its pulse again. Trump always believed he could rewrite reality if he shouted loud enough. But law doesn't listen to volume. It listens to evidence. And when the shouting stopped, what was left were documents, signatures, and truths that didn't care about politics. That's how power ends, not in flames, but in paperwork. And maybe that's the final irony. The man who built his empire on television was finally undone by transcripts.